Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome to another episode of the Scho Bro Show. This is behind the steel curtain editor Dave Schofield coming at you Tuesday night, just after 9 o'clock Pittsburgh time. Where else is the Steelers fans would you rather be? And with me as always, except when he's not, is my big brother Rich, Big Bro Scho. How's it going tonight?
We're bros, we're Schos, and we're here to do a show.
That's what it is. So, hey, I didn't screw up the intro this week like I did last week. So,
that is correct. I was quite proud of you.
We're already a better product than the last show. So there we go. You got to try to get better every show. But hopefully you all were joining us here tonight. I already see some people in the live chat. People were ready to go. It's a crazy time of year, because there's football on, but it's not Steelers football. We are down to 3 games remaining in the NFL. I can actually say that now because there is some people try to say, well, there's 4, but I never wanted to count the Pro Bowl game anyway. It's not a real Pro Bowl game this year for sure. They're at least admitting it's not a real game where they're not even putting on pads. So don't have to worry about that. Rich, did you catch the action this past weekend? Did you watch most of the games?
I watched a few of the games.
Yeah.
I didn't catch them all. Let's see. I only caught the end of the first game Saturday.
End of the first game. I'm trying to remember. That was Jacksonville, Kansas City. I caught most of that one, pretty much all of that one, now that I think of it.
At the end of that one, watched all the late game.
No, I didn't catch all that one. I was at our niece's birthday party, and I was traveling back. I had to leave to help to assist one Jefferson Bartholomew Hartman, who is the coach of my son's unified basketball team where he plays with Jeff's kids, and then was going back to our niece's birthday party and forgot to turn it on my phone until I got there, until I got an alert that Patrick Mahomes was out with an injury, but he came back. So I watched, I'm pretty sure it was the second half of that game. Most of the night game. Man, I missed probably the first 4 or 5 plays of the 1 o'clock Saturday of the Bengals Bills game. Man, what a disappointing postseason for the Bills. They didn't play very good against Miami, but they made it through.
They didn't.
And then they came out and did the same thing.
You thought with the game with Miami, you thought, well, maybe they got that, got
playoff
the stink off there. But
washed off of them.
Not. So,
yeah. So honestly, after that game, I almost put it on Twitter, but I'm like, I haven't tweeted for a while. I'm not going to bother. But I was ready to say, you know what? Because the only game left for this past weekend that was still going to go was San Francisco and Dallas. And after the Bills lost, I said, there's nobody left that I even want to win a game remaining. Every game that's left, I pretty much want every team to lose. It doesn't work that way. But that's how it goes for me most of the time in the NFL playoffs. Who am I left with? Like 4 bad choices going forward. Oh, well, it's still football.
Yeah, but, for me, it was like I was watching the games when I had nothing else to do. I wasn't supposed to catch that first game Saturday. I actually went out to do some ice fishing, but the ice was sketchy. And after trying to get on it and I busted through it, I was like, I'm not.
Yeah, you're not doing that. That's a trip not worth taking. So that's what's going on. We've got Steeler news to talk about. We've got Steeler news. Yes, I'm ready. Are you ready for it?
Yes, bring it. Go ahead.
Big announcement. Finally, the Q has come back to Pittsburgh. Former 6th round pick from the 2021 NFL draft, Quincy Roche, Q from the U, the nickname I came up with minutes after he was drafted, is back on a reserve future contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Rich, does this signing that doesn't mean anything to you?
The one thing it does mean to me was I'm trying to remember. Did he get poached when we were trying to sneak him to the practice squad?
I assume the Steelers were wanting to put him on the practice squad. He didn't make the 53, and he got claimed on waivers.
Right. So there must still be enough there that the Steelers like, this guy kind of has a chance he might still fit with what we're trying to do, what's it hurt to sign to the reserve future contract and bring? So, super excited about it. No. Did it make sense to me? Yes.
Yeah. And, we're going back and forth talking about different positions, and this is not the position we were planning on talking about tonight. As you can see from the title of the show, if you could see the title of the show, is that we're going to talk a little bit about cornerbacks here coming up. But, maybe we could have transitioned and done this one instead, but now we'll still leave it. But you look at it, you've got TJ Watt at outside linebacker. You've got Alex Highsmith, Malik Reed, who they traded for, free agent. Jameer Jones, exclusive rights free agent. That means you bring him back on the league minimum as long as you want him. But as someone pointed out in the comments of the article at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers, that Jameer Jones doesn't even have a career sack. At least Quincy Roche does. He did in 2021 with the Giants. Now they had him back on the practice squad this last year, but if nothing else, you've got someone that can come in and fight for a roster spot. If nothing else, you're not left completely, oh my goodness, the Steelers don't even have enough bodies at outside linebacker heading into free agency then the draft. Could they still go out and sign some? Does this mean that they can't go out and sign someone at the position when free agency hits? No. Does it mean they can't draft an outside linebacker in order to come in, that you might want to have be that third guy, rotational guy, if the Steelers have the right person that comes to them in the draft? No. It doesn't change anything else that you could possibly want to do. It just means you've got a little bit more at the position.
Yep.
Yeah. So I just love the nickname. That's why I'm excited that
when I saw that pop up, I was like, oh geez, Dave's gonna be happy that we got.
Yeah. And it's not like I think he's he's the answer to the Steelers' problems or anything. No, just I did the breaking news podcast when he was drafted, and I just called him Q from the U, since he was from the University of Miami. And all those guys, whenever they do their intros on Sunday Night Football, they're like, the U, I'm trying to think, like Ed Reed, the U, one of those things from back in the day that when they would give their announcements. Why do all those guys have to have deeper voices than me? I don't know. Terrible impersonation, but that's why I came up with that one. So it's fun to talk about. The Steelers have now signed 19 players to reserve future contracts. There are 4 players that were on their practice squad this year that they did not sign yet. One of which was John LeGlue, who signed with Tennessee. The other 3, it's Mark Gilbert's one, and I'm trying to remember who one of the other ones. Who there was another significant one there. That was kind of surprised the Steelers haven't signed back. Here's another thing you got to think about with some of these guys. What's better, to sign a reserve future contract with an NFL team, or go check out the XFL or USFL during the offseason?
Yeah, who knows?
Because you sign that reserve future contract, you're not getting paid. I mean, the only thing you're getting paid is the stipend throughout training camp that players get. It's not like your contract kicks in that you sign. It's only if you make the team. So if you were a practice squad guy, the Steelers I know I'm taking a chance. I know I could get injured, but could I go get some experience playing in the USFL for a couple months and see if things will still work out later? I mean, I would kind of respect that. Honestly, chances are John LeGlue would have been pretty good off just getting some experience there, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe they're much better off getting experience on Steelers practice.
Did you want me to answer that question?
Yeah, I do.
About whether you're crazy?
Yeah. Oh, I meant the question. You can answer that one too. I meant the question of, would some of these guys be better served by?
Well, are you crazy? As I've always told you, is an obvious yes. I don't know. I'm trying to remember. There was some. What was the deal that was worked out with the XFL? When some of those guys they got early on, they aren't allowed to jump to the NFL.
Yeah, that was
Wasn't
when the
that going on?
XFL, that was when they were doing their startup and they were signing players to contracts. That was, before, I guess that would have been fall of 2019 because it was 2020 that they ended up, because
as long as there's
they were,
nothing like
they were, was it, which one? I'm getting them mixed up because the XFL was the AAF was the other one or what it was. Which one of them died because of COVID? Basically they couldn't do much because of everything with COVID, which was the spring of 2020. Versus one of them just, I think the AAF just folded on its own. And then the XFL came back, and then COVID was a problem with it. But with that one, they were signing some of these marquee guys to get ready for playing that spring. And like one of them was Landry Jones. Because, that was fall of 2019 because the Steelers, the rumor was the Steelers checked into Landry Jones about coming in as a backup rather than Duck. And the XFL wouldn't let him out of his contract.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. Yeah, thank you. The CUDA 70 said, Dave, it was XFL. Thank you. It's starting to trigger the memory there. So, I mean, to me, I know someone, brings up, hey, what did the Steelers do? They drafted safety Sean Davis, who's trying to, catch back on in the USFL, and they passed on Von Bell, who's now, one of the better safeties in the league and still in the playoffs. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Those things are always going to happen. But
hindsight's always 2020.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I've read something that's very funny, Daniel J. So that's a good point. So maybe we should move on from that. So since we were trying to figure out the XFL, let's talk about cornerbacks. We said the Steelers. Was there any other news that we really had to talk about? The Minkah Fitzpatrick was the Pro Football Writers Association. He made their all NFL team. Alex Highsmith made the all AFC team. That was all from the Steelers. And there were no Steelers rookies that made the all rookie team. That came out today.
That was a little surprising.
Yeah. But I'm like, I understand that, Brock Purdy is the hot choice right now. Mr. Irrelevant, come in, do that. But how many games did he actually start at the end of the season? I can't even remember because I wasn't paying attention to San Francisco at the time.
To me, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
I don't think guys on the Steelers who are our top rookies.
Mm-hmm. So that's why
I don't think George Pickens, Kenny Pickett, Jalen Warren. I don't think they're going to worry about that too much because I think there's something else that they would much rather have.
Okay.
And, if they do things the way they want to do them, maybe they will get a shot. And that is,
yes,
show them the blame.
They'd rather have the ring because, I thought maybe George Pickens, but then when you see that the two receivers that they picked were the only two rookie wide receivers that went over 1,000 yards this year. Yeah. That basically seemed like that was what they did.
Sure.
So and I get that. So, I don't know that they were snubbed or anything, but the Steelers were not represented on the all rookie team. So that was some other news. So let's dive into cornerbacks because we talked about the cornerback conundrum. And the reason I say it's the cornerback conundrum is it feels like more years than not, we're talking about what are the Steelers going to do at cornerback. Yeah. Seems like almost every year, even when the Steelers had their number one in Joe Hayden, the question was, who's going to be the other cornerback with Joe Hayden? You had 1 year in there where you had Joe Hayden, Steven Nelson 1 year, and you knew it was going to be Joe Hayden, Steven Nelson the next year. Other than that, the questions come up a lot. So, as I said before, when we do some of these things, we're going to look back and then we're going to look forward because that's what this show was generally did during the week. We look back at the last game, look forward at to the next game. So we're going to, kind of turn around and say, all right, so this is what the Steelers did at cornerback last year. Is it safe to say, did you get the feeling that the Steelers I don't like to use this terminology, but I'm going to because it's what everyone else identifies with. That the Steelers threw a lot of number 2 cornerbacks into the mix to see if they had enough of them that it would work.
Yes, I felt that. I don't want to say the number 2 cornerbacks. What I want to say is the Steelers took what they felt were a lot of good to serviceable corners, learned what their skill sets were, tried to put them in some situations. Early in the year, they spent a lot of time with some guys going in and out to try to figure it out until they found what they felt was their best combination to work.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, Ahkello Witherspoon barely played. He was injured. Was it week 3 he got injured? And only came back and played part of one more game. I think he only appeared in 4 games this season. I could look it up, but I don't feel like it.
I was watching highlights of him early on, and he was not good.
Yeah. And that's what happened with him the year before. The Steelers traded for him. He came on the field, wasn't good, didn't even get a helmet again until like week 10. And then he came on and ended up leading the team in interceptions. And everyone's like, you can't live without Ahkello Witherspoon. And then this year, it just wasn't a good year from him. A lot of people are thinking he's a possible if you need to trim some cap space, because it's not like the Steelers are in a dire situation when it comes to salary cap, but you also don't want to continue to overpay people that you're not using.
Yeah.
So he's one that's a possibility, and other people throughout there. Cam Sutton, and Jeffrey and I are actually covering Cam Sutton this week in our Steelers Vertex, because we're going to go through and start looking at some of the Steelers free agents, especially the ones that played the most, like the most snaps for the Steelers. And Cam Sutton's one you need to copy early, because one of the things I'll talk about is his salary. He's still got $2.1 million of cap left to count against the Steelers.
Yes.
He still has $2.1 million of unaccounted cap space with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's because he's the last remaining player that the Steelers, during that unprecedented 2020 offseason, where they had 2021 offseason, because the cap went down from 2020.
Yes.
Where they used void years. Cam Sutton has 3 void years left on his contract. Each was $700K spread out there, so he didn't count too much when he signed with the Steelers. Now, the report I saw, I'm pretty sure it was from SpotRack, had that the date where his void years kick in is February 10th. That's a weird one. I'm going to go back and check it. They have it 2 days before the Super Bowl, when usually the date is 2 days after the Super Bowl. That at that point, the void years kick in. All 3 of the void years will all come due in 2023, no matter what, even if they re-sign Sutton. But if they re-sign him before then, those years stay on those years, each spread out into those years. So if the Steelers are wanting to bring back Cam Sutton, it's going to be wise that they would want to do that sooner than later. But he might want to test free agency, which, believe it or not, is actually then going to make it harder for him to come back to Pittsburgh, in all honesty.
Yes.
Because, his dead money that would only be basically $700K this year, and for the next 2 years after that, comes all in at $2.1 million. So Cam Sutton isn't under contract. Levi Wallace has another year. Got the exact same deal as Ahkello Witherspoon. And to me, the way the deal was structured is like they might only keep one of them going forward.
Yeah.
That's
what I thought. That's what I thought when they signed Wallace to that deal.
Yeah.
Like they may be competing for the spot the next year.
Yeah. Arthur Millette was brought in on a 2-year deal, and James Pierre is I'm pretty sure I have to go back and double check it. I'm pretty sure he's a restricted free
agent, I believe.
I don't know that the Steelers are going to tender him as a restricted free agent. I don't know that they're going to have to pay him. I mean, my goodness, last year it would have been $2.54 million. So it's only going to be higher this year. I haven't looked at what the number is. I don't know if they're going to want to pay him that much for one season. I was surprised that they did it last year with someone like a Marcus Allen. But he's also a guy that they could maybe just sign to a different deal. Other than that, before that, they have to actually do that.
Right.
That's the cornerbacks. That's the cornerbacks for the Steelers. Like Josh Jackson was on the roster for a while. They waived him towards the end of the season to bring in another safety, to bring up another safety from the practice squad, and then he got claimed off waivers by Arizona. I can't even remember. Doesn't matter.
I think it was Arizona.
Yeah. So he's not someone who's around. So last year, the Steelers built their cornerback room in that way. How do you think what are your thoughts from the 2022 season with how the cornerback position played out?
Honestly, it didn't play out that bad, really.
No.
I'd say that we were. I mean, gee whiz, the secondary as a whole was fantastic. I mean, they tied for the league lead in interceptions. But there were times where I felt they were feast or famine.
Yeah. Well, let's look at it. Let's look at when they had famine and when they had feast. I had this up here. I got to make sure that I'm in the right spot. If you look at the pass defense, let's look previous to the bye week. The pass yards given up. Now remember, this is also, yards thrown by the quarterback minus sack yards. So week 1, the Steelers gave up 299 passing yards, and that's with having 7 sacks. So, Burrow threw, I could look up exactly what it was, but I'm just looking at the team stat right now. He threw for over 300 yards. The Patriots threw for 250. The lowest passing output on the first half of the Steelers season was the Cleveland Browns threw for 205 yards, but that's because they ran for 171. Okay, but every single team threw for over 200 yards, and the Buffalo Bills threw for 432. That's that game that kind of threw everything off.
Right.
Now you look at the second half of the season. Now, in week 11, the Bengals threw for 346. Other than that, the highest amount of passing yards given up by the Steelers, other than that Bengals game, 188 yards. They were the Steelers over the last 9 games, every team's last 9 games of the season, the Steelers were the 4th best passing defense in the NFL. And they were the number 1 overall defense in terms of yards over every team's final 9 games, with the exception of Buffalo and Cincinnati because it was their 8 games. But I did an average, so it didn't matter. Now, some of those teams you could say, wow, they no more than 200 yards. Well, they played a lot of rushing teams. But look at those teams. Like the Carolina Panthers, they gave up 181 passing yards and 21 rushing yards. And then the Panthers the next week ran for 300 yards. Of course, the Ravens in week 17, they only gave up 120 passing yards, but they also only gave up 120 rushing yards. So it wasn't like they were going absolutely bonkers. Now, the first time against the Ravens, they gave up to 215 rushing yards and only 94 passing yards. And that was why. So there was a lot more, quote unquote, run heavy teams and not as many pass heavy teams in the second half of the season. But still, to not give up more than 190 yards in any game, except for the one to the reigning AFC champs, that's not terrible. That's not terrible. And it's more than just the cornerbacks that comes down to.
Right.
But they're part of that gets evaluated in that. So that kind of tells me how you said it was kind of hit or miss. That's the overall stats. Now, within that, were there any game in particular that stood out with you that you thought maybe was a little bit more of a miss in there?
No. I mean,
I'm trying to remember. They're all running together. I mean, I think the Cincinnati game was one that stood out a little bit more.
The Cincinnati game stood out, from early in the season, the Buffalo game. No, like I said, they weren't.
It wasn't even a game by game. It was even situation by situation and play by play as things went out.
Yeah, like certain drives it would just be like we're getting killed in the secondary, and then the next two drives were not at all. It's like
I have your perfect example.
okay,
The first matchup against the Ravens at Acrisure Stadium. The Steelers doing all they can. All of a sudden, the defense is looking great. And on a third and long, it was like a 3rd and 12 or 3rd and 15 or something. It's like a 25-yard pass to Deshaun Jackson, who's just wide open, standing in the quote unquote soft spot of the zone. But you can be in a soft spot of the zone and still have people around you, and there was no one around it.
yeah.
It was just one of those like, oh my goodness, you can. And it's defense as a whole is like this, and it's particularly passing defense and cornerback. You could go out there and make great play after great play after great play after coverage after coverage after coverage, and mess up one time, and it's huge.
Yeah, I don't remember if it was that play or not, but there was one play like that during the season where the Steelers were in zone, but like somebody messed up, and I want to say it was a linebacker. I don't remember who played man.
Yeah.
That left somebody wide open in what should have been their zone.
Yeah.
They followed somebody out. They followed somebody
that they
out
should
of their
zone.
With.
Yeah. But this one I was talking about, I'm pretty sure it was like James Pierre was the closest guy. But when you have a breakdown in coverage like that, and this is why sometimes scores like PFF is really tough too, just because you're the closest guy doesn't mean it was your fault. And my goodness, Minkah Fitzpatrick, All-Pro this year. He didn't get anything last year. I think last year Minkah Fitzpatrick got blamed for so many things because he ended up being the closest guy there, and it was not his fault.
Yeah. Hey, I had to ask something because I couldn't remember if we mentioned, you were like going through our corners that we had. Did and I don't remember if you did or not. Did we mention William Jackson?
I did not mention William Jackson. That was going to be going forward. You know why? Because William Jackson did not step on the field.
I know.
So we're going to talk about that one going forward. So real quick before I lose it, Steel Dog 88, he's $5 the tip jar. Thank you so much. I didn't lose it. I didn't forget it. This is going to be a good transition into, I wasn't sure if you were done, but I didn't want to lose the comment. We're going to get into this more. He said, can you see the Steelers drafting 2 cornerbacks like in 2022 when they drafted 2 wide receivers? Right now, I'm going to say no right now because the Steelers got a 1, 2 2s, a 3, a 4, and 2 7s.
Yeah.
Unless they want to throw another 7 on a cornerback, they already used one higher. I don't see them using 2 high picks on cornerback. And of course, this is going to be way easier to answer after free agency.
Yes.
But yeah. Now, if something happens where the Steelers get an offer they can't refuse for that first pick of the second round, where they end up trading back a little bit and pick up some later picks, then I could see that more as a possibility. That's why I said right now.
Yeah, right now, I'd only give that about a 10 to 15% chance of happening, but that could all change as we get into free agency and we see what the Steelers do.
Yeah. So, because the Steelers, let's see, it is 7 picks, right? A 1, 2, 2, a 3, and a 4, and 2 7s. Yeah, they have the 7 picks. If they end up with 8 or 9 picks, then I could see that a little bit more just because of, exactly how they have it is the biggest thing coming into play. But also it's going to be free agency. So do you want us to talk any more about last year? Are you ready to look ahead?
No, I mean, I'll just do a quick wrap up of where I really felt like the cornerback room was.
Okay.
The cornerback room was solid. Okay. It was full of good players, but not Pro Bowlers.
Yeah.
It was a group that was really good.
Yeah.
I don't even want to say just they were okay. No, they were really good. Yeah, they were good. They were solid. They weren't super splashy. or flashy, but you had a bunch of guys that were solid and knew how to do their jobs and did it.
Yeah, it's like I said, tied. Granted, most of them came from Minka Fitzpatrick. Not most of them, but the majority, the biggest portion came from Minka Fitzpatrick. Yeah, and 2 from TJ Watt of the interceptions. So you've got to say that the cornerbacks were doing something there. But it's one of those things where it almost seems like the sum of the parts was more. You got more from the sum of the parts than you did from anyone person. And it took some time to get there too. It really did. And also the opponents didn't help either. They had a better. They went against teams that didn't have the high passing attacks. Those were more front loaded in their schedule. So I can see that for sure. I don't like using the term. I mean,
can I use the Mike Tomlin?
Go for it.
Mike Tomlinism here. But when it comes to the cornerback room,
is you going to use what I use all the time?
Yeah, they didn't kill us.
Oh, they didn't kill us. Oh, I thought you were going to say they took care of business individually and collectively. Because individually and collectively, he uses that all the time.
Yeah.
And I apply that to a lot of other things. So there's a couple of different ways to look at it. And we're going to lead this into the philosophy for next year. I'm going to tie this over. But first, we're going to go ahead and take our break. If you're here with us at YouTube or Facebook Live, give us a couple seconds. If you're here on the audio, listen to an awkward silence and probably come back without anything there. So stick around. We'll be right back. All right, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, here we go. We are talking about the Steelers cornerback conundrum. We're going to get into the whole idea of drafting cornerbacks in a little bit. But my question is this. Looking at last year and you're looking at what you could do going forward, was that philosophy good enough of saying, hey, we've got a lot of good, solid cornerbacks, no one that's great, but bottom line is you didn't have any one weak link. You didn't have anything that was extra strong that made it to where it covered more than you would have otherwise. The teams that have a top cornerback, a lot of times you can deploy them in a way where they're covering more than than others are. Not necessarily more area, but having a bigger responsibility than others. Therefore, they're leaned on a little bit more rather than kind of dividing up the labor among everyone because that's kind of the level they are. Is it better to have that one strong corner and hope that your weakest link isn't so weak that it kills you? Or are you better off saying, hey, we might not have anyone that really stands out, but our weakest link is strong?
Yeah. It's I'd say overall, Dave, what part of what it comes down to me is this is, the Steelers last year had the highest paid defense.
Yes.
In the NFL. They kind of had to pick and choose where that money was being spent, right? They did not throw as much money at the cornerback position as they did at others.
No.
It worked out.
Yeah.
Could it continue to work out in that mode? If you build it properly, it could.
Yeah.
I don't know right now that the Steelers know exactly how they want to build that.
Yes, and that's the thing. Would it be nice for the Steelers to have that one corner that stands out above the rest? Were they trying to get that at the trade deadline?
Maybe. We don't know because he never stepped foot on the field.
Yes. But I mean, do you think that's what they were doing, or do you think they were just taking a flyer? We'll never know because it didn't work out. And like I said, the Steelers didn't lose their picks. The only thing is the Steelers now have, they had a little bit less than $3 million that would have rolled over into next year. Right now, the Steelers are a little bit. They've applied for just over $4.5 million that would roll into next year. I think it was just over 4.5 or just under. Right, or I can't remember the exact number. It was 4 something. They would have had another, $2.75 million to roll into next year's salary cap, but they ended up paying William Jackson III to work on getting his foot straightened out.
Right. They may have been looking at that there. Who knows? Right. And moving forward, again, we may know more as we go into free agency and see what the Steelers do to see what their plan is. We may have a clearer picture. We'll have a better picture of it through free agency, seeing to the Steelers what do. Do they re-sign Cam Sutton? Do they sign somebody else? Do they not really sign anybody? In which case you figure they're going corner probably with their first pick.
Possibly.
Yeah. Or one of those second rounders. It's like exactly where they are deciding to go. It's hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
The nice thing is, though, is we saw a formula this year that they showed could be effective. I'm going to hate to do it, but I'm going to bring it up because we talked about, there is a connection because it's not just corner, it is the secondary as a whole.
Yeah.
Did things change some for that secondary when KC came back off of IR?
And you could run that 3 safety.
And you could run some of those 3 safety sets. Or you could get into dime packages with 6 defensive backs and only be throwing 3 corners out there. 3 corners, 3 safeties.
Then you can really implement what you're wanting to do. Are you wanting that third corner to be an Arthur Millette, which is more of, like a, not even when they had 3 safeties, but I mean, when sometimes is that third corner an Arthur Millette because you're really looking at it based on the personnel, you'd have the extra defensive back out there, but you think it's going to be more of a run look, or you having the other one be someone like a James Pierre that was out there playing as well. They had they had so many pieces that they could turn on in the secondary at the end of the season last year that they could just do so much. And you're right. KZ coming back really added a lot to that.
Right. So, I as we're looking forward, it's one thing to talk about all the different possibilities because there are going to be a lot. I know folks were throwing out there early on when they saw the topic, hey, are we going to draft Joey Porter Jr.? I don't know. Maybe we will. I don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know if that's even a possibility. We may get a better idea on whether that would be a possibility based on what the Steelers do as they're into free agency with this. But it's another one of those where I'm going to kind of I don't want to say I question. Well, yeah, I did question a little bit, because you and I talked all the way back that we seemed like we had a room full of number 2 corners.
Yeah. And I don't like that terminology because the whole thing is like, oh, are they a number 1 corner? Well, technically, if you're the best corner on your team, you're the number 1.
We did not.
It's arbitrary.
Okay, let me rephrase it. Okay.
No, I don't mind using it because that's what people use. But
I know. But really, what we're really saying by that is we did not have a true shutdown corner.
Yeah.
I would say Cam Sutton was the closest thing we had to it.
Mm-hmm. And he played pretty good last year. He did.
And, maybe you can even call Cam Sutton a shutdown corner.
Yeah.
But he's not a top tier type of shutdown corner. Actually, you know what? He's really,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even want to say it reminds me of, but, go back a little ways and look at corners, okay? Ike Taylor. We love that guy to death, right? He was a great corner for the Steelers.
Great interview. I love doing that one again. Interview him. I gotta throw it back out there.
Was he a true shutdown corner kind of guy?
Some Steelers fans think that he was. I would not necessarily put him in that category. Yeah.
But he was I would call him a shutdown corner, but not a true shutdown corner. You know what I mean? Like, to me, Ike Taylor was the guy that in over half the Steelers' games could take the other team's best receiver and shut him down.
Yeah.
But he couldn't shut down every receiver in the league.
No.
Right? And when I think of a true shutdown corner, I'm thinking of guys like, Deion Sanders and
Revis
and
in his heyday. Yeah.
Yep. And believe it or not, in his heyday, Joe Hayden was kind of a shutdown.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the closest thing that the Steelers have had to one on their team.
And since we didn't have guys that could shut down every, that you thought could shut down every receiver in the league, did that mean that we weren't okay? Do you have to have one of those guys? Okay. So I saw, let's see, M Marcus 39 said Ike Taylor's not a shutdown corner. No, but I think everybody, but M, I hope you would agree with me that Ike Taylor was a great corner.
Yeah.
And at the time, he was the closest thing the Steelers had to a shutdown corner. And it was plenty good.
Yeah. So here's my question. Let's say the Steelers do bring back Cam Sutton. Let's say they can get him back.
Yep.
Do you want to roll with him as your quote unquote first option cornerback? And when I say that, I mean that's the guy that, when you look at the snaps and who you have out there, he's number one, and then to the next side. Whether or not they're shut down or whatnot, I'm not going into the whole thing that people like to call CB1 and whatnot, because that's very arbitrary what you consider that. Kind of whatever you define that as is up to you. But just imagine. Yeah, and Marcus Turner, Ike Taylor was a solid quarter though. Yeah, but it's the thing is what you're saying, Rich. There, I agree with. What if it's Cam Sutton who gets to be the guy across from the other from the guy, rather than Cam Sutton being the guy and being across from the other guy? What if Cam Sutton is the other guy and gets to be across from the guy? That would be a pretty good Steelers defense, a pretty good in regards to quarterback, wouldn't you say? Yeah. And that's why some people are like, well, the Steelers, they could draft a cornerback high. But then they say, oh, the Steelers can't draft cornerbacks. They're terrible at it. Well, you know what? Cam Sutton was a pretty good cornerback that they drafted in the third round. I liked what KT Smith said about this when Brian Anthony Davis brought that up, and Brian says, no, I don't agree with that. The Steelers aren't bad at drafting cornerbacks. They're never in a position to draft a good one. And KT Smith kind of brought that down as well, and he tied up really good. He's like, there are guys that are going to be drafted at the top of the NFL draft that are good cornerbacks that are scheme independent. They are so good, it doesn't matter what scheme you put them in.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have other guys, probably more, towards the end of the first round and then the other rounds, that they're going to be good cornerbacks if you get them, if you draft the right guy for what you're doing, for your scheme.
Yes.
And I think that's true. And where the Steelers are picking at 17, I don't know how it's all going to play out. There's still so much to happen between now and the draft. I'm doing my mock draft Mondays now just to get names out there for people to think about. You don't know not only do you not know what the Steelers are going to need because of free agency, you don't know how other teams' needs are going to change because of free agency that are drafting before the Steelers. But this week, the Steelers took who I've seen him on multiple places, the number 17th overall prospect, which is ironic that he would go in the 17th pick because that's not always the case. But this week's mock draft Monday was a cornerback, and his name, it's another Cam. It's Cam Smith out of South Carolina. That was a cornerback. He's one. The one corner from Georgia, people I know his first name starts with K. I can't remember it. Some people were talking about, but then they're worried about how he kind of got exposed against Ohio State in the semifinal game. Then, of course, people talking about Joey Porter Jr. All these guys are cornerbacks that you might like one over the other, the only way they're going to work out for the Steelers is if the Steelers get the one that fits what they're wanting to do.
Yeah.
And I also have to say what they want to do, because I'm not saying he would have been a good cornerback, but remember, the Steelers also drafted Justin Lane. Oh, wait, you don't know who that is. Lustin Jane in the 3rd round. Remember that. And at the time they drafted him, he was a corner that might have been that was going to be more what the Steelers were wanting to do on defense. Jeffrey Benedict talks about this a lot. He said, and then the Steelers traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick and everything changed. The cornerback that the Steelers wanted and had even drafted that year, that's not what they were wanting out of their cornerbacks once they were able to get Minkah Fitzpatrick. So that was just one of those things. So you can talk about if the Steelers could use corner, even if they're in their 1st round draft pick. The biggest thing isn't about who's the best one, is which one fits the Steelers. So because the last thing you want to do is get the guy that doesn't fit. Don't get the guy that doesn't fit. That could be good, because next thing you know, it's going to be another story. The Steelers can't draft corners. But do you think the Steelers take a cornerback at some point in the draft? We already said we don't know that they'd take 2, but they could. I think they're going to take 1 at some point, unless they go out and make and do a bunch of stuff in free agency.
Right.
Yeah.
But right now, I would imagine that they do take a corner at some point in the draft.
Yeah. I'll ask you this: William Jackson III. Is he going to be in training camp with the Steelers this year?
On his current deal, no, not
no way they can do that. There's no way they can do that.
No.
That would be crazy.
Yeah. He's either going to be gone and re-signed to something better. Yeah, something that's better for the Steelers, or he's just going to be gone.
Honestly, they could extend him. And just say, hey, let's sign you to a 3-year deal, and a 2-year extension that's going to be 3 years, and then spread everything out and restructure all that. So they wouldn't have to do it by cutting him. Right. They could just do a new deal.
Yes.
Or they could cut him and then work out a new deal. But there's no dead money with his contract, is the nicest thing there. So the Steelers quarterback conundrum is, do they do what they did this year? And they have a lot of very adequate guys that did I still think they did, especially how they finished up the season. I think they did a great job. But I don't know that it's going to necessarily get better based on who the players are. It's not like they're going to, I don't know that they're going to make huge leaps either. If they have the same kind of players, you're going to kind of get what you get. Do you think the Steelers do that scenario, or do you think they go out and really try to say, hey, let's get a big time corner?
Honestly, I think they're more likely to roll kind of with how they did it before.
Do you think a lot of that hinges on being able to sign Cam Sutton?
Yes.
I agree. I think that's the number one. I think Levi Wallace is a good number 2 corner. I think that he can get the job done. I think he's even better as the number 1 corner is better.
Yes.
So there's a lot going on there. And this is not my wheelhouse talking about cornerbacks at all. But it really is, what are the Steelers going to do going forward? They don't have a full cornerback room. They've got to make some decisions. They kind of have it, but a lot of people are saying, they could see both Witherspoon and Jackson not being in black and gold next year, which very well could be. So there's a lot going on there. So here comes our big question. You ready for it, Rich?
Ready.
Okay, here's our big question. It's going to be very similar to last week. Now, I'm going to remind everyone, if you answer the question in the live chat before I type the question in, I'm not going to bring it up. You're going to have to type it in again. And we're probably going to scold you and make fun of you. Last week, everyone was jumping the gun. Was it 2 weeks before? Not one person did. Everybody waited. But
it was once the Steelers were totally out of it, and we didn't have Steeler football to watch last week. Everybody forgot the rules.
Yes, yeah, that's what it was. Everyone forgot the rules. So that's the rules. We're not going to be huge sticklers of the rules. We might say, oh, you got to put it in there again. But here's the question. So wait for me to type it in, because Rich and I will answer it first. Because we don't want to be influenced by you all. We don't want to just steal your answers. So that's why we give our own, and then you guys can feel free to steal our answer. But it's similar to last week. Last week we asked, where was the backup quarterback for this coming year, where was that going to come from? I'm going to give a very similar question. Rich, the number one cornerback for the Steelers in 2023, you know, the one that's going to be the one that they hope to get the most snaps, never leaves the field, stuff like that. Is that player either A, on the roster as in they were with the Steelers in 2022? So the answer of roster means could even be one of their own that they bring back. So that could include a Cam Sutton. Are they going to be an outside free agent? Is it going to be someone that they get in the draft? Or do you think it's going to be acquired via trade? Those are your four options. Roster, which also includes players that played last year, even though they could be free agents. Free agent, meaning someone from the outside coming in. The draft or via trade. Where do you think their number one cornerback for next year is going to come from?
I think they were on the 2022 roster.
Hold on, I'm trying to type this in now.
Okay. Well,
Give me a little more information.
I was trying to be fast, like people be. But I have a feeling the Steelers re-sign Cam Sutton, and it's him. He plays the most snaps at corner next year, just like he played the most snaps at corner this year.
I'm going to agree with you, but I even think the Steelers could take a corner as the top, even with their first pick, but not expect that person to be their number one in 2023. They want to get them out there and have them be the number one for beyond. That's my thought that I think it could be. So no, I know some people might say free agent Sutton. We're counting Sutton as being on the road because technically he's still under contract because of his void years. So he's not a free agent yet. So we can say, oh, people were ready. We're ready. Man, nobody jumped the gun that I see. And well, I mean, someone gave a suggestion, but it wasn't really answering the question. And everyone was ready. This is great. So let's go. Claude Bishop says draft, saying draft that guy and get him out there to be the number one now. Okay. Mark Malone also says draft. Wilson Pava says draft and wants someone specific, but we're not going there. Brian, help me. Talon. Brian. Thank you. Says outside free agent. Okay. Steelers Pittsburgh says free agent. Jay Hanna says roster. Steel Dog 88 says roster. So far pretty even split. I threw the extra one of trade because I didn't do it last week and people were saying, what about trade? So I put it out there. No taker so far. George Teston says free agent. Reginald River says draft. Dwayne Dwayne, there we go, says on the roster. Jennifer says on the current roster, meaning, like we said, that still could be a Cam Sutton. Maybe it's Levi Wallace. We don't know. State of the Steelers, Daniel J says draft. Alan Goddard says roster. BF Bud says free agent. Thaddeus, hey, I haven't seen Thaddeus for a while. He says who it is, but he says draft. Jerry Cherry says free agent. Mike Sirigiano. No, I said that wrong. No. I'm sorry. Mike, I'm sorry.
No, ready? How about Sirignano?
I think you got it right. That's probably closer. I butchered it. He says draft.
No, we all over the place.
Because that's another one I never thought about. I'm going to bring this up because he brought that up. Brian, who I can't say his last name, said, remember, it's not just Sutton. It's not just Levi Wallace. It could be William Jackson III.
It could be.
That's another option. I didn't say that one, so thank you for pointing that out. Carswell says draft. Joseph Donovan says current roster. Great 103 says probably draft and then said a little bit more. John Walter said draft, but he would prefer to have something else in the first round. Kathy Ford says draft. Jamie Carlo says draft. Thomas Riley says free agent. And Marcus 39 says on the roster. Brian Brown says on the roster. He even said who he thought it was. And if any more trickle in, No, these are just other thoughts of different people. Yeah, and that's right, because it could be said.
Apparently, I nailed it when I thought I was probably trying to butcher it worse than you were.
Yeah, no, you did it. I'm not even going to try to repeat it because that is me messing it up, just because of things. So, if any more pop up, we'll get here. Let's just remember our whole podcast lineup. Kari says free agent. Thank you. Is continuing to come throughout the offseason. Tyler W says draft. There might be a few changes here or there. But tomorrow night you're going to have Know Your Enemy. I still don't know if they changed the name with stuff that yet. With Jeffrey and Shannon, or who's scheduled to be there. Hopefully Shannon can make it. I know he's dealing with some family issues that could have him in or out. So we keep Shannon in our thoughts. McDave, I'm leaving it at that. Says draft. Make sure Joseph Brown says free agent. Man, they keep rolling in.
This one I'm going to bring up. You got to say it in a different way. I've seen it come up a couple times.
Okay. Bart Mackey says, what does that mean?
Roster, at least at the beginning.
He means roster. Yeah. He says at least to start. Oh, he means at least to start the season. Gotcha. Correct. That's what he means by in the beginning. Okay.
I think if I got what Bart was meaning by his comment was, it could be Cam Sutton to start the season, even if the Steelers draft somebody high, and it could kind of start to look more like it's starting to transition as the year goes.
Yeah.
Which is very possible.
And I like that people brought up William Jackson III, but you know what I have to say about his contract?
Can't do it.
No, you just can't do it.
Can't do it.
Nope. Because it's just going to be too much for the Steelers. Don't generally pay that much for someone that outside the organization, and you can't really count that he was in there. But make sure you're checking out our audio podcast. You're going to have a Let's Ride tomorrow morning. Make sure you check that out. And of course, BehindTheSteelCurtain.com for all your Steelers needs. Rich, are you ready for
playoffs?
Yeah, I am too. And what do you have to say here to close us out tonight?
Yeah, well, if you want to talk playoffs, no, I don't want to talk playoffs.
No, we don't have to. No, I'm just saying we don't have to talk about it.
Good. I feel like from last week to this week, I don't want to say it's like the off season. I already feel momentum for the off season, meaning that it's feeling more like the Steelers are getting into their off season business.
Yes.
Which is not as exciting as Steeler football, but it's still the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it's still Steelers news, and it still gets me excited for Steeler football. And in the end, that's what it's all about. Everything we do from now until kickoff week 1 is from here, at least here on on the podcasts, is all going to be about getting ready for that kickoff week 1. And to me, that just means, it's months away, but you all know it goes faster than we think it did. I couldn't believe, we talked about that wide gap we get in the off season last year, and I couldn't believe how quickly we got through it and we're into training camp.
Yeah.
I really only had about a 2-week period in there where I felt a real lull. And then we were back into training camp and Steeler football and excitement and, black and gold and Coach Tomlinisms and all that great stuff. And we're going to be back into it again. I can't wait.